Alright, hello everyone, and welcome to our round of 8 match for our second Offworld Trading Company tournament between KingMorgan and SorenJohnson. Immediately, we're seeing that not really any good founding spots available right off the bat this match. We've just found a little bit of water, a little bit of carbon, and a fair patch of silicon. Of course, both these players are going to be hunting a little bit more for the other three resources in this game: the aluminum, the iron, and the carbon. Those base building blocks you're going to need to continue to upgrade your colony as we proceed throughout the game. KingMorgan has spotted a small patch of iron, something usable, but not really what you want to throw down on. SorenJohnson pretty much kind of in the same way. These players are finding things that you can use, but not necessarily that you want to use. So I wouldn't be surprised if we see this map explored quite thoroughly before anybody manages to found. Alright, there we go. KingMorgan, he spots just a little bit better patch of aluminum. He's going to go ahead and jump on the rich aluminum that he's discovered and the iron. That'll allow him to push for fairly rapid upgrades. He might need to be a little careful with his steel production, but all told, it should be a good patch of resources for him to find. Soren still hunting around. He's already going to be founding second. He wants to make sure he makes the most of it and gets the absolute best plot left on the map. But I'm kind of concerned for him that it looks like there aren't that many good spots left at all. We've got just a little carbon available. All of it's spread out in kind of awkward patches. We still have this kind of low patch of iron. It's just none of it's looking too good. But Soren's finally decided to just take a couple of the low carbons, and what he's going to do here is he's founding closer to the water and the silicon than KingMorgan managed to. So even though he's not going to have as easy access to those base resources, maybe not even as much of them as he would like, he'll hopefully have to pay fewer transportation costs on fuel for his blimps in the long run. And that'll just keep his stock price a little bit higher, make it a little bit more difficult for KingMorgan to overrun him. But I have to say, KingMorgan's off to a very strong start this match, relatively speaking. Alright, steel mill's coming down for KingMorgan. He's also gone ahead and claimed the geotherm right next to his base, which is absolutely fantastic for him. That's a very nice geotherm to have with potential for superconductor, and of course, if it ever does get blown up, then it's very easy to repair when it's right next to your base. Claim auction coming up. Both these players likely going to use this time to keep looking around the map. Game is paused during this time, so it makes it very easy to go ahead, take time, take a breather, check out what your opponent is doing, make sure you haven't missed any important details around this map while we wait and sort out this claim auction. Now, claim auction's already up to about 20,000. We could see it pushed to 24 or 28 quite easily. We have even a couple of times seen it pushed up to 32. So we're just going to have to see if does Soren have it in him to push that auction to 32, or is he going to let it go for 28,000? 28,000, an extra claim on over to KingMorgan. That's understandable. Soren was already up a claim this game, or at least he will be when he hits HQ level 2, because of the fact that he was forced to found second. And so when he hits that upgrade, he'll already have one extra claim available to him. Maybe it's okay to go ahead and let this one go, especially because he managed to force a high price for it out of KingMorgan. However, this lets KingMorgan set up his third steel mill, which is all important because it doubles his steel production over having just those 2 steel mills. Gives him a solid 3 steel a second to go along with his 5 aluminum a second, and is going to allow him to push to HQ level 3 and get this geotherm down much faster than he would have been able to without that extra claim auction. Soren, I'm kind of concerned about. I feel like Soren perhaps did not identify the fact that KingMorgan had collected so much aluminum, that he was going to be flooding that market just to try and push to his upgrades, especially because he was so light on steel production initially that KingMorgan was almost forced to sell down this aluminum at first before he actually got that third steel mill up. And so in response, that's going to bring the aluminum price far down. Maybe initially Soren could have passed up on that high aluminum tile, since KingMorgan couldn't afford to take it anyway, and gone for something that would have proved a bit more profitable in the short term, like the water or the silicon initially, and expanded into the aluminum a bit later if he had needed to. Feels like more of a set build, going for just 2 carbon, 1 aluminum, not really factoring in the fact that this game is a little bit different from most of the ones that we're going to see right at the very start, because there simply wasn't enough iron available to make it worthwhile to take. Alright, Both players just establishing their nice silicon and water income at this point. Soren a little quicker to that as the scavenger player. That's pretty standard. He doesn't have to actually set up that steel production chain. Scavengers functioning off of carbon instead of steel. Makes things a little bit easier. Soren has, however, had to commit an entire 4 tiles to carbon at this point. So it's not proving as much of an advantage as he might hope as a scavenger, given that he has 4 tiles committed to producing his base resource, while his opponent has 5. It's not as much of the advantage off production that you really want. Soren actually going to take an additional water tile here. Hasn't sent out the pump yet. Might need to get that done soon if he's going to go ahead and take the tile. There it comes. And he's also gone ahead and taken a geotherm. I'm a little concerned for Soren. If this water does not push him to HQ level 4, he's going to have a very hard time getting there, because he does not have any kind of real production chain set up. He doesn't have anything to make money if this water drops off. New claim auction coming out. Oh, Soren. Soren keeps getting close to letting this one go. Here we go. Both players paying attention now. They're going to go ahead and keep fighting over this auction. Usually the second one goes a little lower than the first one, but I don't know if that's what we're going to see here. Soren's going to push it for 24. Yep, that's a little bit lower. This time on over to Soren. So, first auction for claim over to KingMorgan for 28,000. Second one over to Soren for 24. That puts Soren at a very slight advantage in terms of debt, as we can see. However, KingMorgan was able to get up his power a bit sooner. He's already got the oxygen and fuel established, so he's not gaining debt as quickly as Soren at this point. And I would expect for Soren's debt to overtake KingMorgan's before too terribly long. We actually even see that KingMorgan has identified that maybe he doesn't need to have 600 aluminum sitting around in the bank, so he's going to go ahead and head into a solar panel, just using those nice aluminum tiles to make sure that his debt doesn't get too out of control, and he can continue pushing later and later into the game, where he can allow his expansive advantage, where he has extra claims over his opponent, to really take over for him, and provide him a nice late game advantage just off of having so much production. Soren has moved into 2 glass furnaces. Gonna be some nice income. He needs to actually get them, turned on and auto supplied, but that's okay. Should be a nice little bit of income. And getting down this glass production pretty much guarantees he will be able to get to HQ level 4, as that's the last material that he requires after his carbon and aluminum to go ahead and get there. So it's a good move on Soren's part, but I'm still concerned. KingMorgan, as we can see, already pushing ahead in HQ upgrades. He's HQ level 4 to Soren's HQ level 3. On top of that, he's moved into one of the resources Soren is trying to use to make money, and he's going to be doing it more efficiently than Soren. 2 adjacency bonuses per building, 3 glass furnaces up total. Good. This is the kind of thing Soren needs to do. Soren's power surged KingMorgan's glass production. So now Soren's glass production will be a bit more effective, and EMP comes down on his as well. Both players going ahead and attacking each other in the resource that they're trying to make themselves, right? They want to make sure they're making the money on glass, but overall, I think Soren's going to get the slight edge here, simply because he hadn't put down all of his glass furnaces yet. And so he still has one producing. His opponent does not. On top of that, KingMorgan got hit by a power surge, and we can look at the frozen times and see the power surge significantly more effective against a small number of buildings than the EMP. These frozen timers are much longer than Soren's are on average, since the EMP halves its duration the first step out from that central 2-minute freeze on the central tile. Pirates coming up this time. Different auction available, which is kind of nice to see. Pirates aren't going to be necessarily hugely valuable this game. You're basically trading debt in order to steal some of your opponent's money, so they can be worth an awful lot overall. However, this game, we can see there are no major resources, no particularly valuable resources separated from the base, right? We just have aluminum coming in. We have some silicon coming in, some water, basically, and we can check and see that, well, aluminum's $15. Water's $12 and silicon's $16. So that doesn't even compare to stealing like the $140 food that's available perhaps. So that auction's going to go ahead and go over to Soren for 14,000. I'm a little bit concerned about that. That seemed a bit expensive this game, and he's going to have to he's just hoping that the game pushes to an awkward point where one of those resources gets a little out of hand. Then he can throw down pirates, but it's a bit of a gamble. at this stage of the game, whether or not these players are going to allow that to happen. Both players have moved into farms. Understandable. It's a pretty standard move on this patch for this stage of the game. Around HQ level 4 and 5 is when we see there are plenty of farms established as they make a large amount of money. Once again, Soren going to go ahead and power surge those the moment they're online. He does not want them interfering with his food income. That's making him a good $100 a second per tile. Solid move from both of these players. Nobody really getting aggressive in the stock market yet. But it should be noted, KingMorgan still sitting on about 60,000 debt, hasn't let that get too out of control. Soren, on the other hand, already up to 100,000 debt. His stock price is certainly suffering from it. He's almost $3 behind his opponent, as of course, having that debt has a 5 times multiplier effect attached to it for its negative impact on your stock price. So even though he has only 100,000 in debt, his stock price acts as though he is actually missing $500,000. Not really the way you want to be. Glass still successfully making some amount of money. The farm's doing better and better, which should be no surprise. Food is very heavily consumed by these players once they've managed to push up to HQ level 5. And finally, we have somebody getting aggressive in the stock market. Soren's going to be the first one to try and make some buys, but I'm a bit concerned for him. KingMorgan can't defend himself right now. He spent all of his time transitioning and adjusting. He hasn't actually saved up any good supply of funds. However, that said, KingMorgan definitely is still HQ level 5, and okay, he has managed to strike back 2 stocks for each player. I'm worried that KingMorgan's production might turn out to be a little bit better. That's kind of what happens with expansive players unless the other player goes ahead and makes a really powerful move against them. We can see Soren's relying almost entirely on these farms for money right now. He hasn't managed to move his glass into anything effective yet. His water isn't making a whole lot. His silicon isn't making a whole lot. And his aluminum is making just a little bit, and his carbon is of course absolutely worth nothing. Whereas we go over to KingMorgan's side, we see he's got the same amount of food down that Soren does. It's going to unfreeze soon. Claim auction. Claim auction for 5,000 of Soren. Apparently KingMorgan has better things to do than bid on auctions right now. And on top of that, though, KingMorgan's also establishing electrolysis reactors. Soren, on the other hand, he's moving to match KingMorgan's electronics factories in production. And I'm a bit worried about this move as well, because as we can see, the electronics factories of KingMorgan are actually not making any money. Their net revenue is basically nothing. And they're just going to continue to get worse because there's no pressure on electronics at this point on this map. Nobody is going into special buildings. There's no robotic player. Nobody is consuming this high-level resource. Yet both players are producing massive amounts of it. So as we can see, Soren realizes immediately upon building these electronics factories, man, that was a bad idea. Maybe I shouldn't have done it. He goes ahead and shuts them off. And this will allow him to sell his carbon down to the market, which is kind of nice because carbon's peaked up a little bit. And he has also managed to establish electrolysis reactors, and these are going to be the kings of the moment, right? Plenty of fuel and oxygen being pumped out of these, water being used to make them, water very cheap, oxygen and fuel very high, and well, that's the name of the game. Buy low, sell high. That's all you got to do. Still though, we're going to need to see these electronics factories transferred eventually, I'm afraid. KingMorgan does need to start defending himself very quickly. I'm a little bit concerned that KingMorgan, rather than buying up his own stock, has decided to instead attack Soren. Now, the reason I'm concerned about this is as an expansive player, typically, like I said earlier, you want to keep pushing to those late stages of the game, right? You just want to drag the game out, send it as long as you can manage when you're playing Offworld Trading Company because you just have so much more production than your opponent. You want to outlast that stage where black market is cheap and your scavenger opponent can continue to use it against you. And so KingMorgan, what he's doing is he is matching Soren's aggression instead of defending his own. He could be buying up his own stock, making it more difficult for Soren to actually complete the game. Instead, with the moves he's making, he's pressing for a shorter game by saying, alright, either you're going to kill me or I'm going to kill you right here and now. What have you got? And I have no idea who's going to succeed at this one. It should be noted that both players have a hacker array down, which is a nice way to finish up a 1v1 match. However, neither of them is making any use of it. And so I don't know if it's even going to ever go off this game for either player. Interestingly enough, KingMorgan has turned his off. Doesn't really make a serious difference, but it does kind of indicate to us that maybe he doesn't want to use the hacker array at this point. $5,000 pirates go over to Soren. That is a huge win for him in a lot of ways, potentially, because he can steal some water. However, the kind of issue with that is Soren not only took pirates kind of to steal water, and he's trying to steal water with them, he may have forgotten that, well, if I'm going to try and pirate my opponent's water, maybe I shouldn't nuke it down to the point where he's only making a quarter of a water per second. Just kind of a thought there. That's not going to go as well for him as he would like. Soren's had to turn off most of his production. The water is really what's carrying Soren through this game at this point. Finally got to the stage where water had pushed up to about $120, so those pirates are paying off to some extent. But most importantly, this water pump is making almost $300 a second because of our $100 water. This water pump, we've got a very similar situation, down to 200 now as these cells are going on. But I feel like Soren might manage to clean up this game purely because water went ahead and spiked. He's only 6,000 away from finishing it up. KingMorgan is staring at this 80%, which means Soren is 80% of the way to the cash that he needs to finish out this game. Once that hits 100%... Wow, Soren was fast on that button. I was hoping we could get over to the victory screen, but no, Soren, he goes ahead and cleans it up. That's going to be death for KingMorgan. Decent ideas that game out of KingMorgan and a strong start, but Soren, he manages to actually capitalize on the fact that both of these players had thrown down massive amounts of fuel. They had thrown down massive amounts of water. I don't think... Okay, here, I can still move around the map a little bit. And so he goes ahead and establishes 4 water pumps for himself. And once all of his food had fallen off, since electronics still wasn't making a whole lot of money, he still had the option of just riding out that fuel to victory. If KingMorgan had defended himself, he could have likely pushed past any of those kind of natural shortages and surpluses that were happening without allowing Soren to take too much of an advantage off of them, make some use of the hacker array he had thrown down instead of turning it back into a steel mill, continue to make use of the fact that he consistently had more production down than Soren, and he likely could have closed out the game, but unfortunately he was relying entirely on resources that required water. He couldn't make any money in those last little stages. He had not defended himself and chosen to go on after Soren earlier, and we can kind of see the results of that against a scavenger player. Very difficult thing to do. We can go ahead and look at stats for a little bit. Check out black market use from Soren. Let's go ahead and start there. 9 hits from the black market for Soren. He used 2 EMPs, 2 power surges, 1 nuke, which was a bit questionable at the end of the day, a mutiny, and 2 goon squads. So pretty aggressive play. Not overly so, but 50,000 is still no small amount to spend on the black market in a 1v1. KingMorgan, he only did about half as much. Fairly reasonable. He only had access to the black market about half as much. Getting a little aggressive when the situation called for it with an EMP, a power surge, but spending just as much time defending himself with just 1 goon squad and 1 new claim. Maybe a bit lax on the defense early, but I know it's difficult sometimes to get into the black market against a scavenger because they drive those prices up very quickly, both players sharing the black market, as it were. We can check the resources screen very quickly. Soren making about $200,000 that game. That's about reasonable. He did a good job of actually finding little ways to make money there. We can see a vast majority of it was in food and water, however, with those strong early farms that he managed to keep online, and then understanding what was going to happen to water's price and going ahead and throwing down a lot of water production in the late stages of the game really worked to carry him through. Whereas KingMorgan, we can see his downfall was really having to purchase so much water. He only made about 100,000, a little over 100,000, 110,000-ish that game. He did a good job going ahead and making those water resources. However, he was forced to purchase a lot of water. And this not only hurts KingMorgan by taking money out of his pocket, but it was basically planting that money straight into Soren's and saying, hey, come kill me now, because you're the one who is going to benefit from the fact that I am driving up this water price. It's a basic premise of Offworld Trading Company. A little bit of steel selling. Glass went about even. The electronics really didn't do a whole lot. Once you count in the aluminum purchasing and the carbon purchasing, things just get a little bit awkward there. So some nice ideas, but not quite enough to finish off a game against someone playing at Soren's level. Still though, generally a strong game from both of our players, so I'm kind of excited to see if KingMorgan's going to be able to turn it around in game number 2 of this best of 3. So let's go ahead and get to it. Alright, got both players in the lobby. So once again, guys, we're going to have a best of 3. Soren currently 1 up right now. Looks like both players just a little bit nervous today. That's okay. That's understandable. When we're usually playing Offworld Trading Company, you're in front of like maybe 3 people, maybe 40, depending. Whereas now they're up again, they're in front of 400, and people aren't used to that situation, you know? It's not a huge deal, but when you are competing, you know, you gotta get a bit of the case of the nerves. That's alright, it's understandable. Looks like they're both just taking a moment to kind of cool off after that game. That's okay, we're in no rush over here. I'm sure we'll get this best of 3 done before long. Still though, well-played game out of both players. Once again, I think I would have liked to see KingMorgan defend himself instead of getting super aggressive. Might have liked to see a little more care on the nuking from Soren, considering that pirates were available. But overall still, we're nitpicking here, and it was a very well-played game from both of them. Guys, generally I'm going to be distracted, by the way. I have a moment to talk to chat at the moment, since there are a lot more of you guys here than usual. I will throw out there, during the games, I probably won't be able to respond to chat, but we do have plenty of people available who understand the game just as well or better than I do. So if you have any questions, feel free to just go ahead and toss them in there. I'm sure somebody will be around to go ahead and answer them. You don't want to see Soren go robotics. Somehow I don't see that happening. I don't know what it is. I don't know. Maybe Soren's just not interested in the robotics. Maybe none of us like playing robotics for some reason. I don't know, guys. Alright. Well, the music stopped, and that makes me feel like I super need to talk, so I'm going to see if these two are ready to go. Oh yeah, having to claim 4 carbon tiles, that was rough for Soren. Some games you can get by on just 2 carbon tiles, and so having to commit twice as many of your very limited number of claims is very rough for a scavenger player. Yeah, which was a good call on his part. Definitely strong moves out of Soren in that game. Alright. Looks like both players are good to go, so let's go ahead and head into game number 2. Hello everyone, and welcome to game number 2 in our round of 8 match for the second Offworld Trading Company tournament between SorenJohnson and KingMorgan. I went ahead and screwed everything up. We're going to have to restart. That was my bad that time, guys. Sorry. I don't usually do that. I don't know what it is. Hopefully they noticed. They should have noticed. Unfortunately, chat's a little broken in the game right now, so I don't know if I could have easily gotten messages to them, but I pulled a Saberman. That's pretty simple. I told you guys, this early in the morning, I don't do well. That's what I get. Cubit, I started as a player instead of as an observer because I forget that even though I had selected observer last time, I had to reselect it. It was just kind of a bit of a mess. So, thanks for the encouragement from PB, though. It's good stuff. Let's go ahead and do this.
Hey.
Hey.
Yeah, I saw.
Alright, good. Just making sure. Okay, then. I am set correctly this time, so we'll be good to go for game number 2 once you guys are back then. So I'll go ahead and pop on out of here. I just wanted to make sure we were good to go.
Yeah, I'm good.
Alright then. Yeah, I was set as a player instead of observer. That's my bad. We'll hop back into it and get going in just a moment here. Oh, guys. Early morning tournaments. Not my style. But you know what? That's when we could do it, so that's when we're going to go. See if we can get some confirmation out of them. If not, I'll go ahead and go in just a little bit here. Well, they're both readied up. So I'm going to assume they're ready to go. Because I don't want to delay this any longer. Excellent. Hello everyone, and welcome to our second match, or second game in our round of 8 best of 3 between KingMorgan and SorenJohnson. Looks like this map doesn't look too forgiving. There are plenty of resources available, but a lot of hills in the way are going to keep these players from founding really great locations. They're going to have to keep looking around and very carefully decide where they want their HQ to sit so that they'll be able to maneuver around the hills and find plenty of places to put their buildings and still get those adjacency bonuses that are all important in Offworld Trading Company. Soren has scouted off to the west, found some decent chunks of carbon and iron. Nothing too great though, no really good high sources available, no fantastic adjacency available. Finally we find a chunk of iron that's actually kind of usable, but it's off on the edge of the map. There's no good water available with it, and KingMorgan is actually going to be the first one to found. The moment he finds that medium iron patch with some aluminum next to it, he just wants to go with it. That's what he's going to make use of. I'm a little bit concerned about the fact that he took this iron mine instead of this iron mine, because of course, despite the fact that they're gathering different resources, if you plant metal mines adjacent to each other, they get adjacency bonuses. And so he could have improved both his iron and his aluminum output significantly by simply taking these 3 tiles rather than the 3 that he selected. So maybe a bit of a misstep from Morgan at the start of this game. Once again, we do see Scavenger up against Expansive, which usually I kind of give to the Scavenger as a slight edge. Their black market effects can do a good job of shutting down Expansive before they can really get going, much like we saw last game. Much faster start for Soren this time. We can see this time he even went for the water pump rather than the aluminum mine right off the bat. Maybe not exactly the correct decision. Once again, the game's slightly different. His opponent not having that 5 aluminum a second coming in. And on top of that, Soren getting off to a much stronger start makes the aluminum a bit more powerful at this stage of the game. Both players want this high silicon tile. Not going to happen though. KingMorgan goes ahead and grabs it up from Soren. Rather unfortunate for Soren if he was going to be depending on that. I don't see a whole lot of great silicon available on this map. But before we take a good look, let's handle this claim auction. More claim auctions for these players. Very nice to see. Just kind of, I don't know, I like the claim auction early. It creates a bit more of an interesting scenario than something like, hey, we auctioned off a random iron tile off on the side of the map. Or, here, figure out what to do with carbon scrubbing. claim, very easy, straightforward to understand. Both players are going to value this, probably going to go for about 24 or 28,000 like we saw last game. We're seeing almost an exact repeat of those bids from earlier. Does KingMorgan push for the 28 this time, though? No. Soren's going to be the one up a claim immediately on day one this game, rather than KingMorgan. Maybe he's just a little nervous about what happened last game. I don't know. I don't know if he really needed to back down. I think he still could have done it, but it's still understandable to go ahead and back off because 28,000 feels like an awful lot of debt at the start of this game. More water pumps coming down for Soren. That's very interesting. Pretty much indicates to us that he will likely want to move into reactors very quickly once he hits HQ level 3. Those electrolysis reactors just providing him a good chunk of oxygen and fuel. A fantastic way to go ahead and burn through your water that you've gone ahead and been collecting and you've kind of tanked the price of as you move through HQ level 2. KingMorgan, we don't have any real good indicator of what he wants to do yet. He hasn't taken any water of his own, which is a bit of a concern. We even spot that there might have been a bit better iron available for him if he had just seen one scan out further, but that's okay. He still has good access to iron. It will provide him plenty of steel production. And we really need to wait for the expansive player to hit HQ level 3 before we know exactly where they're headed, since it takes pretty much everything you've got in HQ level 2 just to get that steel production established.
Colony expanded.
All right, HQ level 3 coming out for KingMorgan. He's going to grab up that high water tile. It's understandable. Water is on its way down, but at least it guarantees him access to this water tile in the late game. If he needs it, KingMorgan also just going to immediately move into reactors. Going to try and take advantage of that low water price before Soren himself manages to hit HQ level 3 and do the same. So it's a very nice move from KingMorgan, kind of just beating Soren to the punch. Soren's going to need to shut these down with power surges if he wants to get any benefit off of electrolysis reactors early on in this game. I'm also very concerned that Soren may be a bit of an overcommitment to carbon. As we can see, Soren has hundreds of carbon stored up, even after that upgrade, and the price is a mere $2. These are actually losing him money effectively because their ridiculously low power cost is still so much as to not cover the carbon that's coming out of them. All right. Electrolysis reactors also coming up for Soren. He's got one claim left. We really need to see this committed to another. There we are. As we can see, aluminum getting kind of expensive. Soren does have the slight better access to that, but these players not gathering up a ridiculous amount this game. So it was making it kind of difficult for Soren to go ahead and get his fuel production established. But once again, he is running behind. He is not keeping up with money with KingMorgan again. So KingMorgan, again, it feels like to me, taking a slight early lead in this game. But this time we have pirates come up for our day 2 auction instead of an extra claim, so that's a nice little variation. Pirates might have some value here because there is aluminum to steal. This extremely valuable $53 aluminum. If KingMorgan could steal up 200 of that, that would be a serious blow to Soren, whereas on KingMorgan's side, he doesn't really have anything valuable to steal. Soren is primarily taking these in order to defend himself or to manage to use later. KingMorgan doesn't want to press any harder. Might have been a bit of a misstep. He could have gone quite hard on those pirates to do a real good blow to Soren at this stage of the game, but he doesn't need to push it any higher, so he's just going to allow Soren to have that debt. And hopefully we see KingMorgan, maybe rather than rushing to that HQ level 5, going ahead and getting aggressive on Soren after forcing him to, at this stage of the game, already be in $60,000 of debt. But we'll just have to see what happens. Alright guys, you've killed electrolysis. Congratulations. Both of you are losing money in it now. Like fuel and oxygen both dying off very quickly this game. Both players with very compact bases. They haven't spread out a whole lot, and so fuel's not getting all of the demand that one might usually expect it to in these games. And both players have gotten to the point where their electrolysis is worthless. Thankfully for Soren, he's figured this out. He's managed to turn it off, so it's not burning money for him at $15 a second per tile. For KingMorgan, on the other hand, he hasn't quite noticed yet that despite water's exceptionally low price, fuel and oxygen also not doing so hot. Most of the loss is honestly going to be in power, so it's not really funds that are leaking through his fingers, but he certainly would like to be paying off debt with power at this extremely high $127 price. so it might be worthwhile to turn them off and get them transitioned anyway. KingMorgan just doing a little bit of damage to Soren, taking that one little stock price while Soren's stock is a little bit cheap. Soren doesn't overreact though. He doesn't do anything too crazy. He just goes ahead and he transitions away from his electrolysis, which is now almost certainly actually straight up burning money for KingMorgan, and moves into glass. KingMorgan moving into glass at about the same time. However, he also managed to push to an upgrade. So if he notices that this electrolysis is just losing money at this point, he will be able to move that into something like food very easily. He could move maybe into chems short term even to make a little bit of cash and then transition into food. Something along those lines is very doable for KingMorgan, and he's going to have to make a move like that in order to actually get an advantage off of his expansion. There he goes. So both players, once again, similar resources. We've got glass down for both of them. Food down for KingMorgan. Soren will be able to catch up to the food very quickly, and we're seeing a bit of a repeat of last game. Not too surprising with both players going for the same colonies. We've had similar auctions. The big difference, though, I think, is this aluminum price has gone a little more nuts, which is making it more difficult for Soren to really keep up in expansions than it was last game, despite his better start. Pirates, somebody take these, please, man. $3,000 pirates. Soren, you cannot let those go. $3,000 pirates over to KingMorgan. Let's see if he identifies the excellent thing that's available for him to go ahead and steal right now and takes it, or if he goes for something else a little bit later. Pirates have come down. Where did they drop? Pirates are dropping in a position where they're going to be stealing both water and aluminum away from Soren. That's not necessarily what you want, given that water's about half the price of aluminum right now, but it's not the worst thing in the world. They're both reasonably valued, and KingMorgan actually getting very aggressive against Soren at this point. I'm a little bit concerned here because now that we've had all these dealings with power, what's been happening this whole time is Soren has been dumping mutinies onto KingMorgan's geotherm. And so KingMorgan has had access to no power production whatsoever. This has put him in a position where he's got about $100,000 of debt. So once again, a good $500,000 taken away from his company's value based on that. Soren, on the other hand, because he has been stealing KingMorgan's very powerful geotherm plant, we can see this is pumping out about $300 worth of revenue, all going towards Soren's debt right now. He's been stealing that away. He has been establishing a lot of power production for himself, and so he has heavily reduced his debt. And his stock price is now much, much higher, and we can see that's kind of the reverse situation we've got going this game. Is this stock price being high isn't simply from KingMorgan having purchased so much of it, it is also because Soren has very, very, very little debt, and KingMorgan's kind of missed his window of opportunity purely because he has not been focusing on protecting his geotherm. He needed to get this goon squatted against a scavenger player when power was going a little nuts. He didn't quite pull that off, and now it looks like Soren might be the one taking an advantage this game. He already has a significant number of farms online. He's got 6 farms available, decent adjacency bonus attached to those. Half of them are actually functional right now, whereas KingMorgan has no farms online. He is moving into 5 more. That's going to tank the price very quickly. We'll have to see what kind of moves the players can make out of these, assuming the game lasts that long. And he also has glass furnaces online, which are currently burning money quite effectively, given the high cost of oxygen and the slightly increased cost of silicon. I don't know how this game's going to go, guys. It's a very interesting situation. KingMorgan only needs to push to about $75,000, well, probably closer to about 90 to 100,000 to actually clean up Soren. But Soren, he's managed to hit HQ level 5. So all of KingMorgan's upgrading is kind of stalled out. He can't keep it going. He can't continue to take those expansive bonuses. He's going to take a claim auction for 4,000 again away from Soren. That was probably would have been worthwhile to take for Soren. I mean, 4,000, that's basically free, as it turns out. But once again, another mutiny on this geotherm. We see the debt continue to pile on for KingMorgan, and Soren is at the point where this power plant, they aren't paying off his debt anymore because he doesn't have any. That money is getting dumped straight into his funds. So if we look, these geotherms are now the single most valuable tiles on the map for him. Even his fantastic farms are only making about $50 a second, whereas his geotherms are pulling in almost $300 a second in funds flat. All they have to do is cover the price of his fuel and his oxygen right now, and then all the rest of that goes straight on into funds. So that's a fantastic amount of income for Soren. The stock price is very high, but what Soren can start doing at this point, he's very well established. He has good carbon coming in for a lot of cash because he steered away from it for so long. He let that price get high. He's moved back into that market for the time being. He can go ahead and potentially start defending himself, but it looks like he actually wants to get aggressive against KingMorgan. Looks like he wants to scare KingMorgan, maybe into paying down his debt, maybe into buying up his own stock, or he could just be headed for the kill, assuming KingMorgan has at this point run out of gas and cannot put out the killing blow that he's going to need to take down Soren. Electrolysis reactors coming down for KingMorgan, as well as steel. The steel's a little questionable. Steel's pretty cheap right now. I don't know if that was entirely necessary. Farms are still available, making some money. Electrolysis making decent money. But we can see Soren is in very, very similar resources, so neither player really coming up with an edge here. Except that KingMorgan has his glass furnaces functional, which means that all told, they're losing him about $240 a second right now. Not where you want to be on your buildings, losing money. Soren has swapped out his glass furnaces. He had them turned off for a significant period of time, so they were no longer burning money. And I don't know if KingMorgan is going to quite be able to push it through to finish this game, given that these glass furnaces are still here. If these had been swapped out for something like Chem Labs, which are quite valuable right now, it would be making, I mean, it says net revenue here, but once you get adjacency bonuses going, they would turn into a bit of a profit. Maybe additional water pumps would have been all right for KingMorgan. And once again, we can see that Soren has nuked out KingMorgan's water, so he's only making 1 a second from this pump instead of 2. And whereas Soren has gone ahead and established for himself, it looks like 6 water a second total? Maybe just 4. 4 water a second for Soren, is that what we're looking at? Whereas KingMorgan, he was forced to take this water tile very far away from his base and is having to pay ridiculous fuel costs to get it back home. Quick little geotherm auction goes out to Soren for $7,000. That's very, very cheap considering power is still at a $130 price. Soren will be able to very quickly pay off his debt that he's getting, piling in at this particular moment with this extra geotherm, and once again continue to make money based off of that. We see a silicon shortage is coming in. Looks like Soren's not going to try and make an effort to actually get a benefit out of that. Maybe worried that KingMorgan has managed to stockpile some amount of silicon, which is understandable, but it means he didn't identify the fact that KingMorgan was losing an awful lot of money early. There he goes. He's finally into the silicon shortage. This is going to be a good chunk of money going Soren's way. We also see there is a power shortage coming in. KingMorgan still operating on basically no power production. His geotherm plant has now been frozen rather than mutinied. His solar panels are not online due to the fact that it's nighttime. He has almost $200,000 in debt, which is driving his stock price down ridiculously. He still hasn't managed to hit HQ level 4. And on top of that, most of his buildings that he has established at this moment are losing money if they're turned on. So things are not looking good for KingMorgan at this point. Water's still going a bit nuts, so Soren, he's also getting into a very similar situation. His buildings are losing money. He needs to get them shut down, or he needs to swap them out and get away from them. Instead, actually adding to electrolysis at this moment. Maybe, nope, he's planning a carbon shortage. Maybe a bit of a misstep from Soren here, not identifying the fact that, well, he successfully drove up water's price, but he's not taking the advantage from it this game. A simple carbon shortage is going to come on through. This is triggered by Soren's hacker array. Nice little building that lets you kind of drive prices around. And if you can find an edge, find somewhere that's going to hurt your opponent and benefit you, you can go ahead and drive up a price on a resource quite high. We can see Soren secured about 850 carbon. He's driven that price up to $150. This is going to continue to rise for the duration of the shortage, and this might just be the killing blow that Soren needs to secure these last 2 stocks of KingMorgan's. We can see KingMorgan is staring at the 100%. We're just waiting for the sellout from Soren. Hacker Ray, a fantastic way to push to that finishing blow, to blast through the last of your opponent's stock. I don't know why I'd selected KingMorgan for the end of that game. We could have looked at a nice little victory screen we didn't get to, but Soren is going to manage to take it on the back of that carbon short, and just some nice maneuvering around the prices that game. KingMorgan not quite as reactive to the changes. He went for some hits early, which was nice when when Soren's stock was cheap. However, Soren managed to take away the power from King Morgan. That really turned the tables and suddenly said, hey, King Morgan, you're the one with all the debt now. I may have had it early, but I've managed to pay it off. Where's your stock price? And Soren just holds on through that early debt that he had acquired and manages to press through for the victory. As we can see this in the stock prices as well, right? We can see Soren dipping down quickly, getting slight boosts when he was doing things like upgrading, when some of his stock was getting purchased, things of that nature, whereas King Morgan manages to steadily stay higher than him for quite some time. But finally, we get to this stage where King Morgan's debt wasn't really managing to push down his price, but it kept it from growing as King Morgan kept becoming more valuable and upgrading and things like. We've got Soren calling here, so we'll go ahead and let him in and talk to him for just a moment. Hello.
Hey.
You won. 2-0.
Yeah.
Bit of a scary start for that last one, though.
Yeah, I was terrified of how he was making money so quickly in the beginning there.
Oh, yeah. Like, we could tell.
He had half my stock, right?
Oh, I know. He got to half of your stock. I was a little concerned that he went so aggressively for your stock. But once again, it kind of looked like he had the early game, and he knew what was kind of going on with that. And he managed to beat you to those reactors, which was a big deal, because we kind of saw that you were going to tank water's price very quickly. You had taken 2 water pumps for 4 water a second. We knew that water price was going to fall. I figured you'd be trying to move into reactors after that, but he managed to beat you to the punch there by getting to that HQ upgrade a bit faster. And so I was really worried about it at that point, but it seemed like the move that really kept you alive that game was just the consistent mutinies onto the geotherm.
Yeah, exactly. I was just shocked he wouldn't ever goon squad the thing.
I know.
Well, you can't really goon squad it when I keep mutinying it, but what he should have done is mutinied it back.
Well, he could have stored up a goon squad, right?
Yeah.
And then stored up a mutiny, taken it, goon squadded it immediately. If you try and hit back at that point, he just has a free mutiny. He can turn back onto you, potentially. All kinds of things like that.
He just never responded by building power. He had plenty of buildings that weren't making him money, so he could have easily dropped down solar power.
Exactly.
I feel like it would have made a huge difference.
Yeah, and it was a real strong start, but it was just like that one small misstep that kind of made it easier for you to fight back a lot faster than he was hoping. And I feel like if he had defended his geotherm, it would have been way harder for you to press into the game, right?
Oh, yeah.
Because he had established so much of your stock. Yeah.
I mean, I had a lot of debt early, and at some point it just completely switched itself. And at one point I had no debt, and I was making, $300 or $400 a second off of power. Maybe not quite that much, but I was making $1,000 every few seconds.
Oh yeah.
And so I bought some of his shares just purely off of that power production. I wish I had actually shorted power earlier, but the carbon short was just so obvious, and that obviously paid off very well.
Yeah. The carbon short was a nice little way to finish up the game. It was pretty obvious as a scavenger player. It's just fairly simple to go ahead and use carbon to clean up a game, but it was still a good move overall. I mean, I love the hacker array for cleaning up a 1v1 still. It's one of its many uses.
Yeah. Well, it's funny, off of that first round match, I kind of felt like, you play even if you play someone who's at your level, which I consider both Aja and King Morgan at that, like you're going to have to the first round, it felt like, oh wow, it looks like we're all going to be building Offworlds. But it just depends on the map and the way things lay out. I think if you're in the lead, you can win with an Offworld, whereas if you're kind of behind, you can win with a hacker array. Which was definitely true in this game.
Yeah, that can definitely happen.
Yeah, I made some huge mistakes this game though. Like I can't imagine. You must have had a field day commentating this one. I was in a race for those. I should have claimed it earlier. That high silicon.
Oh yeah, I saw that.
I knew I wanted it, and I was like fumbling between claiming it or throwing a quarry on it. And then of course I didn't get there in time. But then I claimed the other one, and I forgot to, because I was all messed up, I forgot to actually build a quarry on it. And beyond that, I didn't build a metal mine on that high aluminum for quite a while.
And we saw aluminum go nuts this game. So
yeah, I probably waited too long to claim a second one, but I had like this really scary dead zone when I was at level 2, where nothing I had was making money, and because I didn't have that, because I forgot to build the aluminum mine, I just had to wait to construct the aluminum, and it felt terrible, but I was selling water and carbon at like $4 or $5, and I was just going like, oh, this is terrible.
I was worried about how much carbon you had access to. That was one thing I noticed was I think when you managed to finally hit HQ level 3, I think it might have been, you still had like 200 carbon in the bank, and it was $3 a piece, and it's just like, oh, that's not where you want to be. But you still managed to pull it back, so I'll give you that.
Well, the one saving grace of the carbon being so low is at one point I was able to delete my carbon quarries and use those tiles for something else, which was useful at the time when the food price was so high. And the pirates are painful too, because I didn't. I was the only person who was shipping
aluminum,
anything worthwhile.
Yeah, exactly.
I think he was shipping worth anything. So I took the pirates just basically because I couldn't allow him to grab my aluminum. And if I had been smart and claimed 2 sources of aluminum, especially in different areas, that would have been a lot safer. I'm starting to feel like if you are going to claim 2 aluminums, you should very much claim them in different places. You don't really, once you have 2 aluminum mines up, you don't need huge amounts of aluminum. You're much better off having like a consistent source of it.
Well, there's also the advantage if you claim them next to each other. Obviously, it's easier to do something like just swap them into solar panels, because aluminum is going to bottom out eventually, right?
That's true.
If you know that, they can be a really nice source of power.
Yeah, that's a very good point. I think a lot of it comes down to whether you're playing a 1v1 game versus a general.
Exactly. That'll make a big difference. So
1v1, everything you do, you have to think about how the other guy is going to screw you over.
So people in chat seem to be calling for a game. I don't know if you have time for that, if you would like to do that, or what the deal is, but
yeah, we can do a game. And certainly, if KingMorgan is still around, he's welcome to join us. I would suggest that we switch over to the new version.
Patch. Yeah, we can do that.
So I'm gonna restart and download it. I'm gonna probably step out for a couple minutes, and then we'll try a game. I guess we'll just see how many people show up for maybe cap it at 6.
Okay.
I don't know if we want to do an 8-player game, but
sounds good.
People show up for